All right, testing one, two, three, testing one, two, three. Okay, it sounds like we have a good balance on audio levels here. All right, how's everybody doing out there today? Hope everybody's having a good Friday morning, being productive. This is just going to be a fairly informal stream. We're going to start off with some painting and a little bit of reading, actually. I have some reading set up for today. If y'all don't know, LibriVox is a pretty great resource, especially if you're a book nerd, and I've lined up a particular reading that I think is going to be very interesting for folks. So just give me a minute here to balance out the audio levels again a little bit. I'm going to bring in that reading in just a second, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing today. So I want to bring the master audio for the stream up. So I was going to bring the level on the track up there. And I managed to find some good, fairly generic royalty-free beats for us. Nothing too offensive, hopefully. I'll bring the level on that one down. All right. And the reason I want to do that
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org.
Excellent. Okay, so let me talk to y'all a little bit about what I have going on today. And before that, I'm gonna kill the screensaver. Howdy everybody, how's it going? So, this is one of my very first streams of all time. We did a test stream last week, just me and a couple folks, figuring out the systems and all. I've been playing around with this setup on and off, so it's starting to feel a little bit more natural, a little bit more intuitive, right? So yeah, right now we're just sort of we have the car built more or less in some form, and from here we can start test driving it a little bit. So yeah, for those of you who don't know me, which is going to be nobody on the stream today, most likely. I'm Lysander. I'm a painter and an artist, and I do a lot of different stuff. I'm currently a grad student in digital arts and animation at the University of Southern California, and I've had a bit of an eclectic background with this stuff. I also, of course, studied philosophy and liberal arts in undergrad, so I'm a bit of a nerd. And that's sort of the binding thread for this whole project is we're gonna nerd out together about a range of different things. Okay. Specifically today, I'm just gonna warm up on some painting the way that I often do, and I'm also going to put on some listening material in the background. We've had the music going, that's fine, but I want to get your brain warmed up just a little bit more. And specifically, I think what's going to be a great place to start today is with Herr Friedrich Nietzsche. No kidding, actually, we are doing Friedrich Nietzsche's The Twilight of the Idols. Now, for those of you who are not big old philosophy nerds like me, you might not know that much about Friedrich Nietzsche. You probably have not read through a book like this in a while. I haven't read through a book like this in a while, to be perfectly honest. I read a fair amount. I try to like, just like read bits and pieces of stuff to keep my mental active, right? Um, but yeah, a lot of this philosophical material can be very dense and kind of tricky to unpack, right? Um, and it's good for your health overall, I think, to try to disentangle something a little bit complicated sometimes. And Nietzsche in particular, I think, is a really nice balance of both very readable, right? He's a very good writer. He has a lot of very interesting things to say, but he's also like very subtle philosophically. And there's a lot of times I think that folks will sort of misunderstand where he's coming from. And this happens a lot in philosophy, right? So, The Twilight of the Idols in particular, there's not a big reason why I picked this book other than I think Nietzsche's very interesting. Um, this book is very interesting. He's going to go through a lot of his thoughts about sort of the moment in history that he lived in and how he was trying to contextualize that moment in terms of like what was going on in Europe and the world in general. And he's like very interested in science and culture and arts, like he's very creatively minded, more so than a lot of philosophers. So I think he's also like very appropriate for the sort of conversations that we have here. Um, and I think we're gonna find some stuff in this book that can be relevant to where we're at in life. Um, Before we go too deep into the Nietzsche, I know some folks might have the Nietzsche's complicated. He definitely has some uncomfortable aspects of his thinking from our perspective today, right? I think a lot of how people interpret him today is not always super fair, right? I think there's a lot of misreadings of Nietzsche that are out there. Um, for sure, like he was living in Germany in the lead up to the two world wars, and so he's seeing and commenting on a lot of the kind of cultural material from that time, right? And a lot of those conversations are uncomfortable conversations, about like culture and gender and ethnicity and religion and all this stuff, right? And Nietzsche is not afraid to dig into those subjects in a way that a lot of folks find a little off-putting sometimes, right? And he for sure had some, at best, complex relationships with women, and he often had like sort of weird impressions of women and femininity. I don't think it's like quite the way that some folks will interpret it. Like he's definitely at least a little bit misogynistic, like that's very common for most thinkers at that time. Um, but yeah, so without getting too far ahead of ourselves, let's just let's set some things up here. So for those of you who don't know, Friedrich Nietzsche, right? That's the guy. He's a very eccentric person in a lot of ways. Um, and unfortunately passed away under great distress, suffering from various mental and physical ailments. He was a fairly sickly person throughout his life. Um, his mustache is sort of unimpeachable as they go. uh, and let's look at the Twilight of the Idols as well. it'll be helpful to have a PDF copy to reference. For those of you who don't know, Project Gutenberg is a place where you can find a lot of open source texts just available to peruse. So we can kind of peruse it from here. And we're actually going to skip over some of this preface stuff and start off with Maxims and Missiles, which is a fantastic opening title for a chapter. Maxims and Missiles. And while that is going, I am going to paint. So you can listen to the Nietzsche, you can watch me paint, and if you have any questions, comments, concerns, quips, or quibbles, drop them in the chat, and I will hopefully see them and respond to them post-haste. Set up a couple things here. Alright, and if I need to, I'll stop to comment on things as we go. This book is fairly short, and the chapters are short. We'll only be doing this for maybe the next 15-20 minutes or so.
The Twilight of the Idols by Friedrich Nietzsche. Chapter 1. Maxims and Missiles. 1. Idleness is the parent of all psychology. What? Is psychology then a vice? 2. Even the pluckiest among us has but seldom the courage of what he really knows. 3. Aristotle says that in order to live alone, a man must be either an animal or a god. The third alternative is lacking. A man must be both, a philosopher. 4. All truth is simple. Is not this a double lie?
So I'm going to pause there for a second, and if you've been noticing some of these maxims. So this is what we're listening to. Okay. It's basically, this first chapter is just a series of little kind of like, almost like poetic couplets or something. They're maxims, right? He's entitled it Maxims and Missiles. This is going to be significant because there's a whole combative structure, you could say, to what he's doing. And you can see that a lot of these maxims, there's a bite to them, right? Even the pluckiest among us has but seldom the courage of what he really knows. Idleness is the parent of all psychology. What? Is psychology then a vice? Right? So he's pushing back on ideas of the time. Right now, the theme, we're sort of seeing there's a psychological and philosophical theme, right? He's interested in epistemology, he's interested in knowledge, okay? All truth is simple. Is this not a double lie? So that's already an interesting, and you can take any of these and really reflect on them. Maybe we'll try to break some of these down at some point, right? But for now, we'll continue to just sort of listen to these, and then the next couple of chapters of this book, you can see he gets into more fleshed out thoughts, right? He numbers things in these little chunks, right? And there's themes to it, but he's not like writing out a proof the way that, if you even look at a lot of books today, people don't write like this. This is a very Nietzsche way to write that's informed a lot by kind of his interpretation of ancient writing from Greece or something, so this is he's doing something particular even just with the format from the very beginning. It's supposed to like kind of help prepare your mind for thinking in the kind of way that he wants you to think as you go through this book, right? To like think of these think in these bursts and chunks, and it's very aesthetic, and you start to see that like there's a way in which the aesthetic of the writing and the aesthetic of the thinking has a kind of logic to it, but that'll develop over the course of the book. Um, so now we're going to go back into the reading, and I'm going to go back to some paintings.
5. Once for all, I wished to be blind to many things. Wisdom sets bounds even to knowledge.
In fact, I'm also going to do this. I'm going to link the Gutenberg copy into the chat right now. So if you're listening to this, yes, indeed, Max, we are talking about Herr Friedrich Nietzsche. We're just listening to some maxims from the first chapter of Twilight of the Idols while I do some painting. And if anybody has other questions, we will, I'm here for you. I'm
6.
here for you.
A man recovers best from his exceptional nature, his intellectuality, by giving his animal instincts a chance. 7. Which is it? Is man only a blunder of God, or is God only a blunder of man? 8. From the military school of life. That which does not kill me makes me stronger. 9. Help thyself, then everyone will help thee. A principle of neighbor love. 10. A man should not play the coward to his deeds. He should not repudiate them once he has performed them. Pangs of conscience are indecent. 11.
Yo, what's up, Rocky?
Can a donkey be tragic?
Welcome.
Perish beneath a load that one can neither bear nor
Glad you
throw
stopped
off?
by.
This is the case of the philosopher. 12.
Oh, hey,
If a man
Carrie.
knows the wherefore of his existence,
Doing a pop.
then
What's
the
up?
manner
What's
of
up?
it can take care of itself. Man does not aspire to happiness. Only the Englishman does that. 13. Man created woman. Out of what? Out of a rib of his God, of his ideal. 14.
Okay.
What?
I'm going to pause on number 13 here because this talks about. There's actually a couple of interesting maxims in here that could be a whole conversation unto themselves. But 13. Man created woman out of what? Out of a rib of his God, of his ideal. This is a very interesting observation, I think, and I think it suggests that Nietzsche's very interested in gender. He's very interested in gender. His conclusions about gender are not always the best, but I think he has a lot of like observations about gender that in a certain way are kind of ahead of his time, right? And this is, I think, starting to at least gesture towards that he is understanding on some level that being a woman is kind of defined socially in relationship to being a man, right? And that men kind of have more power in making that definition. That's basically what this maxim is saying, as I read it. I don't know if other people are reading it that way. But he's basically saying that woman was created out of a rib of his own God. Man created woman out of a rib of his own God. His ideal. Okay, so first of all, he's saying that, like, for God in this context, he's talking about the ideal, the divine, the absolute. It's not super clear at this point in the book, but it's, there's this conception of the universe, and this is something that Nietzsche will like flesh out a lot in this book and other books, right? Um, and he's saying that like out of a piece of that thing, you could think about like Plato and like the Platonic forms from Greek philosophy, or like Aristotle talks about this sort of stuff. But like man, whatever man is, reaches into like his ideal of the world and pulls out a piece of it and says like, ah, this piece of my ideal is woman. Now, is that a good thing for guys to be doing? I'm not sure. Is that healthy? Is that the best way to really understand what gender is? Probably not, right? But also, it does seem like on some level, people do this. Men in particular really have a problem with this, where we define, you know, as straight men in particular, or bisexual men, as men, quote unquote, who are into women, quote unquote, there's a tendency to not see another person as like a real person, but as like a manifestation of an ideal, or a manifestation of some like abstract thing that isn't really them, right? So frankly, that's a bar. Frankly, that's a bar. Man created woman out of what? Out of a rib of his god, of his ideal. He's barring right there. Also, there was another one in here earlier that I thought was kind of interesting. This one here, number 7. Which is which is it? Is man only a blender of God, or is God only a blender of man? Just like as a line of poetry, he's straight barring. I think. Also, it kind of reflects the type of project that he's up to here, and it tells you a bit why this chapter is called Maxims and Missiles. Okay, he's slanging bullets. Okay, this is battle rapping. He's like I'm coming for the top. It I don't get this crazy world that we're in. Germany in the 1800s. What's going on? Are y'all just like did God screw up by making y'all, or did y'all screw up by making God? I can't tell which is which. That's what he said. It's like for a society that has like been engulfed in like religious wars and civil wars for generations at this point, like it'd be pretty fun actually to like try to break down the hell was Germany at this time? How did Germany even become like a thing? Nietzsche's writing like it's kind of more Prussia than anything, but like there's also Bavaria that's kind of like trying to distinguish itself. There's religious implications to all of this. We had like 30 years of war through Europe over like the Protestant Reformation and the political implications of that. It was a crazy time. It was a crazy time, and Nietzsche just like yo, did y'all mess up by making up this all this God stuff, all this religion stuff, or did God mess up by making y'all take your pick, man, right? So you just gotta kind of appreciate appreciate that kind of character. I think Nietzsche's very interesting for these types of reasons. Exactly. Let's get a couple more maxims in here. Let's see. We left off. I think we were about to do 16. And this one goes all the way to 44, and we are just about a third of the way through. Yeah, so that's right. So this recording is 12 minutes. We're about 3 minutes in. Let's give it a couple more minutes. Hopefully, you're starting to like feel the Nietzsche. Uh, and let's go back to the painting as well. So this painting, I'm just kind of like feeling the vibe of the storytelling a little bit, and in my head, there's some sort of like primal landscape that's gonna emerge. You might not be seeing much of it yet, but I'm gonna keep fleshing out this idea and let Herr Nietzsche keep slanging his poison for a little bit.
Art thou looking for something? Thou wouldst fain multiply thyself tenfold, 100-fold? Thou seekest followers? Seek ciphers. 15. Posthumous men, like myself, are not so well understood as men who reflect their age, but they are heard with more respect. In plain English, we are never understood, hence our authority. 16. Among women, truth? Oh, you do not know truth. Is it not an outrage on all our pudeurs? 17. There is an artist after my own heart, modest in his needs. He really wants only two things, his bread and his art. Panem et circum.
I only want my bread and my art, man.
18. He who knows not how to plant his will in things, at least endows them with some meaning. That is to say, he believes that a will is already present in them, the principle of faith. 19. What? Ye chose virtue and the heaving breast, and at the same time ye squint covetously at the advantages of the unscrupulous? But with virtue ye renounce all advantages. Paren. To be nailed to an anti-Semite's door. End paren.
That was
20.
an important one.
The perfect woman.
He's going to talk about the perfect woman again. Okay, so I think this is also significant. Number 19. What? Ye chose virtue and the heaving breast, and at the same time ye squint covetously at the advantages of the unscrupulous? But with virtue ye renounce all quote-unquote advantages, to be nailed to an anti-Semite's door. One of the more kind of frustrating interpretations or readings of Nietzsche that you'll come across every now and then, and this is almost never coming from folks who are like academics and study philosophy or whatever. There's this reading of Nietzsche that he was anti-Semitic, which, you know, there was a time when everybody used perhaps language that we would find somewhat insensitive today, right? Like if you read about like how abolitionists talked about black people at the same period, there's you know, some turns of phrase or some assumptions here and there that are probably not great, okay? But you kind of peel back a layer or two, and a lot of times you're like, oh, hey, turns out this person is trying to make a point that slavery is bad, and therefore, you know, we should abolish it, right? So, like you kind of have to look past some of the ignorance that people have in earlier times and try to understand where they're coming from. Nietzsche lived at a time when there was an actual, like, party in Germany called the Anti-Semites, I think. He was like, and Germany in general, Europe in general, grotesquely anti-Semitic, just kind of across the board. Pogroms all the time. It was a rough time to be Jewish, and not a whole lot of folks in that part of the world cared to understand Jewish people or like interact with them very much. There are a lot of just like, bad ideas about humans that people just sort of believe by default, right? But listen to what Nietzsche's saying here, okay? He's saying, those of you who choose virtue and the heaving breast, he's basically talking about like you're clutching your pearls, right? The heaving breast is like pearl clutching, you know? Like those of y'all who pretend to be so moral and so morally disturbed, and who say that virtue is so important, and at this time, you got to think about like the kind of the Christian context, right? That like we're talking about like kind of Christian virtues, and the virtue of Christendom and the virtue of Germany and the virtue of the Aryan people and all that kind of thing, right? Those of you who are so obsessed with virtue and at the same time squint covetously at the advantages of the unscrupulous. In other words, you're looking at people who don't share your moral codes and who are getting ahead in life and who are doing well for themselves. Okay? And you're kind of giving them the side eye. You're like, yo, I want me some of that. Okay? So, like, for example, suppose you live in Stuttgart in 1850, okay? You're very Christian, you're very conservative, you're very concerned about the impact of these Jews in like this one part of the city. You can see that there's a successful Jewish business in the neighborhood, a new restaurant. Hello, Assassin! You can see that there is a new Jewish business in the neighborhood. And you as this like upstanding 1850s German citizen, this good Christian, so concerned about the morals of the neighborhood and all that sort of stuff, you're like, oh, yeah, what's going on with these people? They're dirty. They don't believe the same things we believe. They don't act right. What are they doing? Getting success? Like what? It's countrywide racists in the U.S. today complaining about black people getting ahead and like getting businesses or like getting successful in sports or whatever. It's that same kind of vibe, but in Germany in the 1850s, and it's about Jews. Okay, so what he's saying is that like, hey, look, you might think, as a good, upstanding German Christian or whatever, usury is wrong. We can't have these usurers in our communities. I'm the heaving chest, the pearl clutching, the Jews, right? And freaking out about it. And Nietzsche's saying like, but with virtue, you renounce all advantages. In other words, you can't get ahead. You can't do what these people are doing because you're holding yourself back with your upstanding Christian virtue. Okay? This is like a across the board theme for Nietzsche. He talks about this kind of thing again and again, right? He has so much smoke for conservative German Christians just throughout all of his writing is like dripping with disdain for these like ultra nationalists, like German Christians who are so obsessed with their tradition as Christians and who are like kind of even abandoning a lot of their own heritage in the process, right? And like he talks about like paganism and stuff, and Nietzsche's really fascinating, but this specifically, right? He gives you the context. He's basically saying like, hey, if you're the kind of person who's pearl clutching, looking at and at the same time, coveting what other people are able to accomplish, who live by different sets of values, and you're renouncing your ability to get ahead. You're giving up on yourself by sort of renouncing all these advantages that these so-called immoral, unscrupulous people are able to attain. Right? That's the maxim. And then he says, in parentheses, go nail this on an anti-Semite's door. Okay? And like, by the way, that's an aggressive gesture, especially in Germany at this time, right? Like this is, like, understand, nailing maxims to the door is what Martin Luther did to kick off the frickin' Protestant Reformation. Okay, like nailing maxims to the church door is a way to like start religious wars and riots in Germany at the time. All right, like this has happened in German history quite recently for Nietzsche. There's context here, and when you like really kind of immerse yourself in that context, you see like oh wow, this guy is trying to start shit with anti-Semites. Okay, he's trying to start shit with anti-Semites. It's very interesting. It's very interesting, especially given how uncharitably some people read him nowadays when it comes to anti-Semitism because he does use some fast and loose language from time to time, and we'll probably come across some of that. In fact, that's probably the next one. Let's see what he says here. The perfect woman perpetuate. Ah, what am I doing right now? Perpetrates literature. The perfect woman perpetrates literature as if it were a petty vice, as an experiment, en passant, and looking about her all the while to see whether anybody is noticing her, hoping that somebody is noticing her. Okay, this is where we can see, some of his tendencies, right? Um, he talks about women like this a lot. There are like metaphorical and philosophical implications to what he's saying. He's not necessarily talking about a literal woman or the way that women ought to behave in the world or whatever, but he does often use this sort of imagery of women as, sort of like clever and guileful and like, sort of tricky in a way, and like I think he thinks that's kind of hot or something, like you can tell he's into like what we today would call ratchet bitches. Like he has some like weird kind of like toxic tendencies and like, just like you can tell he's into like a particular kind of woman, right? He's not always like saying something super awful, but it often lands like just kind of gross, dude. Like, why'd you have to say it like that? And maybe you could say something about like other kinds of women every now and then. And maybe when you're talking about things like, petty vice and, like this sort of like double-mindedness are they noticing me? I'm hoping they're noticing me, right? Like, I understand he's trying to talk about like broader psychological qualities here, but also, bro, like, I think you need to go talk to that girl or maybe move on. You know what I mean? Like that's sort of the vibe I get from some of his writing, a lot of his writing about women, or just like when he talks about women in the abstract. Um, but we're about halfway through this right now. I actually ended up talking a little bit more than I was anticipating, just because I think Nietzsche is very interesting. We'll let this run a little bit longer, and I'll try to develop the painting a bit more for you guys before
Perpetuates
we.
literature as if it were a petty vice, as an experiment, en passant, and looking about her all the while to see whether anybody is noticing her, hoping that somebody is noticing her. 21. One should adopt only those situations in which one is in no need of sham virtues, but rather, like the tightrope dancer on his tightrope, in which one must either fall or stand or escape. 22. Quote, evil men have no songs, unquote. How is it that the Russians have songs? 23. German intellect. For 18 years, this has been a contradictio in adjecto. 24.
Random Russian
By
students.
seeing the beginning of things, a man becomes a crab. The historian looks backwards. In the end, he also believes backwards. 25. Contentment preserves one even from catching cold. Has a woman who knew that she was well-dressed ever caught cold? No, not even when she had scarcely a rag to her back. 26. I distrust all systematizers and avoid them. The will to a system shows a lack of honesty. 27. Man thinks woman profound. Why? Because he can never fathom her depths. Woman is not even shallow. 28. When woman possesses masculine virtues, she is enough to make you run away. When she possesses no masculine virtues, she herself runs away. 29. How often conscience had to bite in times gone by. What good teeth it must have had. And today, what is amiss?
So there are a couple more maxims in there about women and gender, and there's interesting stuff going on here. Maybe it might be fun really to do like some really thorough breakdown, and maybe even see if we could get somebody on stream with us at some point to talk Nietzsche for a little bit, because this is like, this is why we do philosophy, okay? I'm giving you my reading of Nietzsche and how I understand his ideas, but like what do y'all think? You know what I mean? It's like there's a lot of different ways you can read some of this stuff, and good philosophy isn't something where you can just always say like, oh, he's saying this, right? So sometimes you can, right? But what's really fruitful about this stuff is the conversation and the reflection that you have as a result of it, okay? Like, I want to try to look at some of this stuff here, because he's talking about gender multiple times in fairly rapid succession. So let's see. Contentment preserves one even from catching cold. As a woman knew that she was well dressed, ever caught cold? No, not even when she had scarcely a rag to her back. This one is obscure for me. On some level, and a big part of doing philosophy also, we gotta try to break down what language they were using originally as well, right? Like, I read this word contentment in English is like maybe like satisfaction, so like to be satisfied, you know, helps keep you from catching cold. Maybe that's it, right? Like if you're okay with your situation, you're not going to catch cold. It's not that's not like biologically true. It's not literally true, but he's trying to make a point here. As a woman who knew that she was well dressed ever caught cold? No, not even when she had scarcely a rag to her back. I'm not sure what role gender is playing in this maxim. Whenever he says a woman, a man, I think he's thinking of gender on some level. There's a reason why he says that, like a woman instead of ye, a person, you, them, him, right? Like he always deals with specific entities in the way that he writes, and that's part of what can be tricky here, right? Is like he doesn't really like to refer to abstract things that only exist in pure thought, like he likes to refer more to like physical stuff, real people, real events, etc., and like try to ground his ideas in that, and then turn those grounded things into like bigger symbols or bigger ideas, right? And like I think he kind of thinks that that's how abstract things really function on some level, right? That like if you're talking about like God in the abstract, you're talking about an idea that's been kind of bubbled up from real stuff, right? Embodied stuff. And I think you can kind of see that in 26 here as well, right? I distrust all systematizers and avoid them. The will to a system shows a lack of honesty, right? Don't try to understand the world through like an absolute abstract set of principles. Avoid that kind of thinking, is what he's saying. He's saying that there's an inherent dishonesty in trying to build a system out of the world or have like a complete system of thought. And like, I think that's part of why, he'll talk about woman and then use that as a way of talking about particular psychological tendencies. Um, yeah, it's interesting stuff. It's tricky stuff. I wanted to see, let's see. Man thinks woman profound. Why? Because he can never fathom her depths. Woman is not even shallow. This is interesting. Like, kind of, if you think about the structure of it, right? Like, we've got and these are characters as well. Like, we've encountered these characters earlier on, right? Like, man creates woman out of the rib of his ideal, right? Out of the rib of God. Here he's saying like man thinks that woman is very deep, right? Or in particular, he thinks that she's profound, right? And I think in a certain way, like we are supposed to keep thinking back to some of these earlier maxims, right? So like when he says woman, on some level, does he want us to think about the thing that man created out of God's rib, right? Not necessarily a real person, but like I referred to this ideal earlier on, and this like sort of rib of the ideal, that's woman. That rib of the ideal, you know, man thinks that she's deep because he can't understand her depths. The reality is that she's not even shallow. That's kind of interesting if you think that like you're kind of defining this concept in reference to yourself. You as like a guy, you as like a guy, you're defining this concept of a woman in reference to yourself, and you think that she's very deep and profound, and you can't really understand what's going on, within the depths of her soul or whatever. But then the reality is that this is a rib. This is a thing that you pulled out of your ideal. This isn't the real person. This is, and so he's saying like this isn't even like it's not even that like there's nothing there. This is entirely surface. That could be a reading of it, right? That like that woman, as man has understood woman, right? As man understands woman, the way that man has kind of constructed this image of woman for himself, it's entirely like a coat of paint. It's a veneer on top of a real thing. It's not even the real thing. So it's like it's not even shallow. It's the surface level. It's concealing the depths. Maybe that's a kind of reading of it. Um, and I think that that's a reading that could be consistent with, like a lot of what he does in some of his other writings as well. And this one, 28. This one was the one that made me pause, right? So, when woman possesses masculine virtues, she's enough to make you run away. When she possesses no masculine virtues, she herself runs away. I could think of a couple, and this is why I think like I don't speak German at all. It would be a lot of effort for me to try to go like look up, okay, what are his original German words and what do each of those words mean, and I'm probably not gonna totally get it, but this is like one of the reasons why it'd be interesting to talk to somebody perhaps about Nietzsche. Have a little Nietzsche chat on stream one of these days. Um, because like this little tag here, I could read that in a couple of ways. She herself runs away. Does that mean she she runs away from the guy, or is she running away from something? Is she running from herself in some way, right? Like I think that's interesting. Like he's basically like there's an association here, it seems, in this sentence between masculine virtue and running away. That the result of a absence of masculine virtue is to run away. Okay? And it's not super clear to me like why specifically does she run away in the absence of masculine virtue, right? But like it's interesting because it's he's basically saying that on some level woman needs to have a masculine component to her, right? That like, but when she has that masculine component, you can't really deal with her, right? And so like he's sort of pointing out a bit of a contradiction or a dichotomy here, I think, right? Like he's trying to point out that like what you consider feminine or woman or what he's considering woman needs to have both a masculine and a feminine component to it, but having that masculine and feminine component at the same time is problematic from the standpoint of you presumably being a guy, right? You being someone like him is hard to say. Is hard to say. I do think that there's like a lot of kind of obscure, like sort of psychosexual stuff going on with Nietzsche that's it's kind of hard to read between the lines sometimes. You kind of have to split hairs, right? Um, like the guy clearly had some complexes around gender, and I think it's easy to understand why if you start kind of peeling back, like what was Germany really like at this time? What was it like to be a guy in Germany at this time? What was it like to be a woman in Germany at this time? What were the expectations around gender, men and women? Like it was a very militarized culture, a very hyper masculine patriarchal culture. Um, there's some wild stories that you can find about like, just sort of the way that the way that German culture was at this time. Um, Gosh, yeah, I think we're about halfway through, a little more than halfway. I'm gonna let this roll a bit longer, but before I do, I'm just gonna give y'all an update on where I'm at with the painting. So as you can see here, I've just sort of been sketching in a landscape. Um, I'm just sort of feeling my way through it. I don't start from color very often when it comes to painting. I like to have a decent sketch just to help me organize my thoughts. I can go a little bit overboard with it sometimes, as you can see. This is probably more detail in a sketch than what is strictly necessary. Uh, but really, all I'm trying to do is establish a rhythm to the shapes in this landscape, and I'm thinking of something mountainous, some rocky rolling hills. I'm trying to indicate maybe a bit of like a body of water down here. Um, and since we're listening to Twilight of the Idols and we're thinking about old things that have been around for a very long time tumbling down, I'm just doing a bit of like an abstract, like maybe there's a laser or beam of energy that's entering into this old rock and splitting it apart, right? So it's a warm up. We're not trying to be too deep right now. Um, but yeah, I'll probably start painting this soon, but I might leave that to a little bit later in the stream because I do have some other stuff for us to talk about today. Um, hmm. Go ahead and drop in the chat if you have any thoughts, quips, quibbles, concerns, anything about Nietzsche you noticed, or philosophy, or questions about the painting, or anything like that. All right, back to the reading.
A dentist's question. 30. Errors of haste are seldom committed singly. The first time, a man always does too much. And precisely on that account, he commits a second error. And then he does too little. 31. The trodden worm curls up. This testifies to its caution. It thus reduces its chances of being trodden on again. In the language of morality, humility. 32. There is such a thing as a hatred of lies and dissimulation, which is the outcome of a delicate sense of humor. There is also the selfsame hatred, but as the result of cowardice, insofar as falsehood is forbidden by divine law, too cowardly to lie. 33. What trifles constitute happiness? The sound of a bagpipe. Without music, life would be a mistake. The German imagines even God as a songster. 34. On ne peut penser et écrire qu'aussi. Flaubert. Here, I've got you, you nihilist. A sedentary life is the real sin against the Holy Spirit. Only those thoughts that come by walking have any value. 35. There are times when we psychologists are like horses and grow fretful. We see our own shadow rise and fall before us. The psychologist must look away from himself if he wishes to see anything at all. 36. Do we immoralists injure virtue in any way? Just as little as the anarchists injure royalty. Only since they have been shot at do princes sit firmly on their thrones once more. Morality must be shot at. 37. Thou runnest ahead. Dost thou do so as a shepherd or as an exception? The third alternative would be the fugitive. First question of conscience.
Morality must be shot at. What do y'all think you mean by that? That's an interesting one, huh?
38. Art thou genuine, or art thou only an actor? Art thou a representative, or the thing represented itself? Finally, art thou perhaps simply a copy of an actor? Second question of conscience. 39. The disappointed man speaks. I sought for great men, but all I found were the apes of their ideal. 40. Art thou one who looks on, or one who puts his own shoulder to the wheel? Or art thou one who looks away, or who turns aside? Third question of conscience. 41. Wilt thou go in company, or lead, or go by thyself? A man should know what he desires, and that he desires something. Fourth question of conscience. 42. They were but rungs in my ladder. On them I made my ascent. To that end, I had to go beyond them. But they imagined that I wanted to lay myself to rest upon them. 43. What matters it whether I am acknowledged to be right? I am much too right, and he who laughs best today will also laugh last. 44. The formula of my happiness, a yea, a nay, a straight line, a goal. End chapter 1. This recording is in the public domain.
There you go, guys. That is the first chapter of Friedrich Nietzsche's Twilight of the Idols. a fascinating, fascinating book from a fascinating thinker, and we're going to be going over some more of that. Okay, we're going to be going over some more of that because it's quite a book. It's quite a book. Nietzsche's quite an author, and he has, I think, a lot to say to us in the world today. I'll say just a little bit more about Nietzsche in a second. I want to kind of get this sketch to a certain place. So what I've decided from this point is that since I already put in a little bit more effort on the drawing than what I really needed to anyway, I'm just going to take the drawing a little bit further. And really what I've decided to do here, I've kind of had like a bit of a thought about storytelling. We're going to have this object, this big rock in the middle here blowing up, and we're going to have like a little group of people who are kind of like on this hillside looking up at this event, right? So it gives us the opportunity to put some characters in, get a sense of scale, right? Um, Give you like a sense of like maybe it's I think it's gonna be like a hunting party, basically. Okay? So I'm giving them these little sticks, spears. And in fact, I'm gonna put like a critter slung over the guy's shoulder. Just trim that up a little bit. Yeah. Used to be like a very kind of low-tech society of some kind, maybe even sort of prehistoric, so I don't have to like do a whole bunch of crazy designs and stuff. Just enough to sort of give you a sense like, okay, they're out here and they stumbled across this event, whatever this event turns out to be. Alright, so before I jump into the painting, I think since I put some effort into this drawing, I do want to think a little bit about the color and find some references before I go too much further on this one, turning into like an actual thing, right? So I think I'm actually gonna jump out of the painting for a second. Jump out of the painting for a second, and I'm gonna open up a new document here, and these are just gonna be some notes because we're gonna chat a little bit more. I'm just gonna chat a little bit about the world, what's going on in the world today. Grab this letter. It's a good size doc. Okay. I'm gonna set this document to have kind of like a dark chalkboard vibe. Because sometimes you need to sketch out something when you're talking. Makes it a little easier to understand what's going on. Okay. And this is gonna be a chalkboard for April 4th. I needed to do this the other day, and it turned into a bit of a hassle getting everything set up, so I'm just doing that right now. I don't even know if we're going to need this yet, but there we go. We've got it. What we're actually going to be jumping into, and I'm gonna give us a little bit of an intermission in a second, but just to sort of set us up, right? Y'all know about Sam Altman, the guy behind OpenAI? Well, as it turns out, there is a pretty rough story about the guy. Check this out. So this is a developing story that is, I guess, we started hearing about this in January of this year, and I've heard next to nobody talk about this yet. I don't know very much about this story just yet. I don't know where we're at with all of this crazy allegations and stuff, but I spent a little bit of time the other day breaking down the new Studio Ghibli AI thing that ChatGPT can do now. I spent some time kind of like going over how it works, how it doesn't work, and over the course of that discussion, we come across a couple of quotations from this gentleman, Sam Altman, okay? And he's an ass. He's been an ass for a bit. We're gonna go over his bio a little bit. We're gonna go over how he ended up being in charge of OpenAI. We're gonna go over a little bit of some of the other projects that he's done. And then we're gonna walk ourselves up to this story in particular and try to understand what's happening there. Right? So that'll take up a chunk of time. Hopefully not too much, because there are some other interesting subjects that I want to discuss a little bit with y'all. But I think in particular for purposes of this channel and sort of like tying back into conversations that we'd had earlier, I think this will be an a valuable story to try to understand. So hold on to your horses. We'll be back. And we'll be back in maybe about like 5 minutes or so. Yo, yo, yo. Coming back in here. How's everybody feeling? Doing good here. It's about 1:40, a little before 1:40. It is a sunny day in California, and we are just hanging out, making some stuff, and learning some things, and chatting on a Friday. So, oh man, I'm a little stiff, folks. Make sure you do your stretches. And I don't do it enough. Let me tell you. Oh man, getting older in the world, right? Watching history go by, as it does, as it does. So I actually had like this thing happen this morning where Cinema 4D, Cinema 4D just reinstalled itself on my computer today. I don't know how or why that happened. It does this every couple like months or so. Like, I think it's when they do updates. I haven't had Cinema 4D installed or Maxon or any of their software installed for years. But somehow they put a little bug in my computer and I can't get rid of it. I don't need, and it's a big app. It's like 900 megs. And like I go and open up my start menu the other day, you know. I go and open up my start menu, and just like it's popping up, like right down here. And I had to like go uninstall C4D, like of all the freaking some goofy shit. Anyway, so Sam Altman. Let's look at his basic wiki bio. Because I actually don't know all these points word for word. Okay. And in fact, let's actually go look at let's look at Sam Altman. Let me see. I'm gonna see if I can find a little kind of like intro clip of Sam Altman, so we can kind of get his vibe. Because a lot of folks don't really, we'll hear about these people, but we don't really like look at them super close. So let's get a sense of like, oh my God, he was on the freaking Joe Rogan Experience 9 months ago. I just do not have the stomach at all for like Joe Rogan or Lex Friedman or any of those guys. I want something. I want something kind of short. Okay, what we're gonna do is we're gonna listen to some of this, not all of this, because it is half an hour long, but we're gonna listen to some of this Sam Altman interview from New York Times events. So I'm presuming that he's being interviewed by a New York Times journalist or reporter here. Let's see. Discusses his corporate strategy at OpenAI, the transformative potential of artificial intelligence, and the ethical dilemmas it presents, in an interview with Andrew Ross Sorkin. All right. Andrew Ross Sorkin is also kind of a weird guy from some of what I've seen from him. I'm not a huge fan, but this is the sort of thing. Okay, so this will be like a good, just sort of like a good, just sort of like basic. This is sort of like the ideal of how Sam Altman wants you to think about him and what he does. Talking to an interviewer who's going to be very sympathetic. So we're not getting any kind of like weirdo takes or like aggressive takes against him.
Sam is here. Thank you so much, Sam.
Thanks for having me.
For being here. We are super appreciative. Sam, of course, is the co-founder and CEO of OpenAI. As I said earlier, one of the most consequential.
Okay, before we even get into this, I do have to comment on just a little bit how you're presenting yourself right off the gate, you know? First impressions matter, okay? This is just like, how do I say you know how some people really look like posers immediately? Like they give you poser vibes? These are poser vibes. I'm gonna be perfectly frank. I'm already predisposed not to like the guy. I find his output to be very problematic. Um, but like just in general, I gotta say, like I find the sort of the informality, you could say, of a lot of these very wealthy tech people kind of annoying. Okay, like look at how Andrew Ross Sorkin is dressed. This is how Sam Altman should he Sorkin is dressed the way that Altman should be dressed for these kinds of events. Historically, in the business community, you're slanging millions of dollars around, billions of dollars even. It was understood that like yeah, you're kind of an important person in the society and there's a lot of formality around what you do. And so the way that you dress and present yourself, you know, would reflect that. I don't think that that's always strictly necessary. I think the suit and tie vibe is, you know, often annoying, right? But I do think that, you know, at a certain point, like, how would I say? Like he's dressed like he's just going grocery shopping or something like that. Except you can tell that those sneakers are like $500. You know what I mean? There's not really a reason for someone like Sam Altman to dress like this, you know, especially not at an event like this, right? He's specifically dressing this way and presenting himself this way. And you know, like it's that kind of tech bro, like, oh, I'm just, you know, like some genius kid who like just like you know came out of the garage, you know, tinkering with my computer or whatever. We're gonna learn more about his background and find out if he's actually some genius kid who just came out of the garage, or if he's closer to like, you know, high finance Rothschild levels of like, you know, sort of wealth and prestige or whatever, you know? Let's keep going with this for a second.
Companies of our time. In just the past 2 years, since the launch of ChatGPT, Sam and his team have brought AI to the mainstream. He has fundamentally really altered how we work, communicate, innovate, and now think about what our future is even going to be like.
Just as an intro, Andrew, Andrew Ross Sorkin. This is why I say I'm not a huge fan. Yeah, let me know if ChatGPT has fundamentally changed the way that you work. You know, let me know if ChatGPT has fundamentally changed the way that you think.
His company is now worth about $157 billion. And I should say, OpenAI didn't just spark an arms race. It really redefined the possibilities of technology. And
I'm sorry to pause so much, but this is a massive overestimation of the significance of this technology, and it's the sort of overestimation that we see constantly. right? And we broke this down the other day. You can go check out my other stream. Um, I'm sorry, but the Ghibli generator has not fundamentally changed the way that anybody works. The fact that you can ask ChatGPT how to resolve a trade deficit, and it can give you a formula that looks impressive, does not mean that ChatGPT actually has the capacity, as a technology, to even try to address a trade deficit. And this is the sort of magical thinking that people have around this technology very often. And like, as frustrating as it may be to think that, like, people in our government, like Doge or whatever, are like using Chat GPT or similar technology to sort of like rewrite the world economy and rewrite the whole government or whatever. Uh, Understand those guys, Elon Musk, Trump, all the Doge guys, they think about AI fundamentally the same way that Andrew Ross Sorkin does. It's fundamentally the same set of assumptions that this technology is magical and can do all of these kinds of sophisticated things that it's just not prepared to do. It can do some cool things, you know, but you're really overselling this right now, you know? And like, I, it's to be expected, and this is why we check a video like this, right? Because we want to kind of see, just like take the temperature. How are people thinking about this stuff? How are people talking about this stuff? This is the New York Times. This is the paper of record that is facilitating this conversation and putting their names literally behind the guys saying this kind of stuff. And it's just demonstrably magical, demonstrably magical. And if you want, I'll demonstrate it again for you if you want. Like, I'll demonstrate again how this stuff works if you want.
And as he pushes towards general, or AI, I should say, artificial general intelligence, we're forced to grapple with some very big questions about the future of work, about the balance of power, about ethical questions, and so many other things. And we're going to delve into all of that with Sam. So thank you, the man at the center of it all.
Thanks for
Great to
having
see
me.
you. So here's where we're going to start.
And at the
2 years
same
ago, almost to this week, basically, you launched ChatGPT. And I think it's fair to say that when you press the button, since then, all hell has broken loose.
It does feel like that.
It has changed the global conversation. It has changed.
does feel like that. It does feel like that. But it feels like a lot of things. And has all hell actually broken loose since ChatGPT was released? Some things have changed, and there's definitely like some big stuff going on. I'm not sure ChatGPT is the reason for all of this. I'm not sure Sam Altman is the man at the center of it all. He's a guy. He's a player. He's definitely a big player, you know. But there's a lot going on in the world, guys. Like this kind of AI tech really has to demonstrate uh, its relevance a little bit more than has been done so far.
Fundraising, priorities, the move of resources.
Twitter's not real life, is what I'm saying.
Other technology companies have shifted the way they're doing things. There have been lawsuits, all of it. And so I'm very curious if you could just take us back 2 years ago, literally almost, as I said, to the day or to the week, and what you thought was going to happen when you pressed the button.
So, in the abstract, we always knew there would be some moment where, for whatever reason, like, the world would go from not getting it to getting it.
First of all, before we go too much further into what Sam's going to say here, I also want you to kind of pay attention a little bit to how Andrew Ross Sorkin is telling this story. This is connected to a lot of, like, critiques of how people think about history in general. He's talking about oh, this is how he tells the story. 2 years ago, before we were having this conversation, 2 years ago, there was a moment when Sam decided to press the button. He pressed the button, and then as a result of him pressing the button, all of this stuff has happened since. All hell has broken loose. The problem is that there was no button. There was never a button that Sam Altman just pressed. Sam Altman himself very likely did not have anything to do with the actual code that was uploaded, launching the website. There was a point where the website was launched. There was a point where the chatbot went live, you know. There were a variety of sort of steps leading up to that, a lot of tests going on around that. Was Sam Altman the guy sitting there tinkering around with the back end, making the website work? Was he the one writing lines of code for the chatbot? What exactly was Sam Altman doing? When did Sam Altman press any buttons? The closest thing to pressing a button that this guy probably ever did was, sit down in a meeting and say, yeah, okay, we'll do that. Giving the go ahead to a team to pursue a particular project. There might have been specific actions that required his approval. And yeah, maybe he even accessed some of the software that they were using to build things. Maybe he even had some kind of administrative access to the website and was actually actively uploading things at some point. I doubt he was that hands-on. Most CEOs are not that hands-on when it comes to actually building and launching products. Um, there was a team of people who did a variety of things that led to this chatbot going live. And in the context of that chatbot going live, there were a lot of other chatbots. People have been developing these kind of smart chatbots literally for decades. I remember playing around with some very smart chatbots back in 2010. Okay. And there was no critical moment between the chatbots I was goofing with in 2010 and ChatGPT when it just became this thing. Yes, large language models came onto the scene at some point, and that had a big impact on how people in this space in general were developing this kind of tech. But there was never a point where this guy just came up with a brilliant idea and just did a brilliant thing. And as a result of him and his brilliance and the things that he was doing, now we're in this crazy world where AI is going to take everybody's job. Brother, this has been a conversation for decades. This technology's been out here for decades. It's a specific kind of narrative and personality and kind of celebrity vibe around this guy and his company. But again, this is why I ask, has your work fundamentally changed as a result of what he's done? Point me to the specific, concrete, practical things that just had to change as a result of the product that his company put out. You're gonna find, a couple of interesting examples here and there, and then you're gonna find a lot of beef on Twitter. You're gonna find a lot of hubbub online. You're gonna find a lot of breathless articles in the tech press about this sort of stuff. And then you're gonna turn the computer off, turn the screen off, step outside, okay? And discover that people are still working more or less the way that they worked before this product came out. Yeah, there are more kids who are cheating on their homework with ChatGPT now. Yeah, there are more people who access ChatGPT and kind of pull up whatever data that it's giving them. But again, what's changed as a result of that? You can probably point to things like okay, maybe learning comprehension is down in schools because kids aren't really reading material as much or aren't really writing as much. There's probably some educational outcomes down the line that we should be concerned about as a result of this tool. Um, And like I understand that a lot of companies have laid people off in anticipation of being able to replace people with these kinds of tools. Also, a lot of companies have ended up hiring people back because a lot of companies have realized that actually this stuff isn't ready yet. And maybe we were a bit too hasty, thinking that we could replace our entire IT department with Chat GPT, you know? The practical material things that have changed because of what this guy made are very small. They're just objectively very small, right? There's a lot of cultural implications, there's a lot of implications down the line, and there are practical uses to this stuff, but it's not like he pressed the button and then like after that, what? What? After that, what? A lot of noise on Twitter. Okay? So there's a story that's being told here. And this is why it's also important to talk about like how he's presenting himself, the way that he's dressing, right? This is going back to a lot of cultural symbols in the world of tech. Okay? A lot of cultural symbols that we've adopted broadly socially that like, oh, this is what a genius looks like. He's dressing like this because he doesn't have time to be all Mr. Fancy because he's busy doing math and changing the world. He's figured out how to tap into a lot of these signifiers, right? And everything about this conversation so far has just been signifier after signifier, right? Symbol after symbol. But what are the symbols referring to? You know?
And that all of a sudden it would be
Let's go back a couple bars.
when you press the button.
So in the abstract, we always knew there would be some moment where, for whatever reason, like the world would go from not getting it to getting it. And that all of a sudden it would be clear that this technology was working. Like internally, it at that point seemed very obvious to us that language models were going to keep scaling, that they were going to do all these useful things. And why it happened at the launch of ChatGPT, I mean, I have some theories, but why it happened then and not when we launched the GPT-3 and the API earlier, or why it didn't happen until GPT-4 launched several months later, like why that exact moment? I think there is some like chanciness to when it actually catches fire. We had observed, though, with the API and GPT-3 that, GPT-3 was a little bit early and it didn't work for that many things. But in some sense, one of the killer use cases of it was developers in the playground, which is where you could like test ideas quickly before you implement the API. They love just talking to the model.
That's really funny. And he's like, oh, this is one of the first killer use cases that we noticed for our AI, which is that computer nerds who like programming and who like fucking around with like weird computer stuff liked fucking around with our weird computer thing. But how is that a use case, my man? How is that a use case? You're not doing anything with it. You're just goofing around. I've done that so many times with so many random websites and goofy. That doesn't mean that it's a like there's this Google thing back in the day. What was it? Deep Dream. Okay. Which was like really fun and goofy to play around with for a while. I made a bunch of images on Deep Dream at one point. I was like turning like Donald Trump into like a dog or whatever with like it all had like the psychedelic swirls all over and everything. And you just goofy stuff, very early, image generator type of stuff. Um, Absolutely useless. Okay? You could not do a thing with those images. They were just in and of themselves kind of novel and goofy and weird. So yeah, let's play around with them. Uh, but the fact that people like me are playing around with that kind of stuff does not a use case make. A use case, right? And even the language he used there, right? The first killer use case that's sort of referring back to Steve Jobs and Apple's language around like a killer app, right? They would talk about this a lot when they were, launching iPhones and stuff. And it's sort of like an idea that's been around in tech for a while. That like you can develop a new technology or a new platform but it doesn't really start to take off until there's something that people can do with it that's really genuinely useful. And then they start adopting it like wildfire, right? So like, word processing was one of those use cases in like earlier devices and stuff, and people realize like, oh, this is a really great way to not just write and like kind of like put text down, but I can like edit whole documents. I can format documents in this, like there's a bunch of stuff we can start doing with fonts. We can start playing around with layouts and graphics, right? Like that was one of the big advantages to early computers, right? Is that like this is such a flexible way to lay out text and prepare written documents compared to sort of more traditional methods for doing that at the time. And so that's a use case. That's when like that kind of technology can start to pick up and take off. Because like, oh wow, we can actually do real work with this. Okay? Publishers can do work with this. Authors can do work with this. Newspapers can do work with this, right? What publishers really need ChatGPT right now? Like it can maybe be helpful for some things here and there, but man, you still got to keep your writing staff and your existing workflow intact, more or less the way that it is, because this tech just does not replace any steps in there. It doesn't slot in neatly to any steps in there. A lot of times it's an impediment. A lot of times it just creates more work, right? And you haven't figured out any use cases. I promise you, he's not going to talk about anything that is genuinely, deeply, inherently useful, that isn't in some way kind of tied to the narrative hype that he's kind of built up around this thing.
They would just sit there and like talk to GPT-3 conversationally about whatever. And that was kind of the main thing people were using it for. So we said, well, if that's what people want, we can make it much easier to use. You don't have to sign up for a developer account and do all these other things. And we can sort of tune it to be good at conversations. And so we said, okay, let's make this as a product. Now, we'd actually been planning to launch it with GPT-4. We finished GPT-4 in like August of 2022, but we held it for a while.
But did you expect all of this to happen?
Again, at some point, we thought there would be a big moment in the world. Did we know it was going to be right then with the launch of ChatGPT? Certainly not.
So here we are now, 2 years later, and the next big question that we're all asking, I can't even believe we're just asking it 2 years later, and you actually just wrote about it.
Before we go on to his next question, also notice, we just talked about like we were just talking about or the this, right? Sorkin is saying that you press the button at some point, then all of this happened. Did you think all of this would happen? And Sam is jumping in there and I'm like, oh, well, no, this is how we developed the thing. We were gonna do like the chatbot first, blah blah blah, right? Um, the this that Andrew Ross Sorkin is referring back to is again, there's been a lot of online discussion on Twitter. Some companies have thought about maybe laying off some of their workforce to replace them with robots, and then have decided that they can't actually do that. Um, and yeah, that's about it. That's about it. Like I'm not sure what else the this is. Like the U.S. government didn't like replace the tax department with AI chatbots. Like no, like there still hasn't been an AI film, you know? Like this thing was supposed to allow us to do this kind of work so much faster, and it's out there for sure, and it's being used, but it's not practically valuable. Uh, so let's jump ahead a little bit, just because I want to see where this interview kind of goes and see where people have been like replaying it more. Let's see what he says here. This might be interesting.
If you read the papers, is suing you over this and many
products. And in that sense, in some sense, the AI itself, the kind of the reasoning engine nature of it will become commoditized. And that's fine, that's good. Like science should be just diffused throughout society. And that's why we're focused on building things like ChatGPT.
One of the other questions, and it is Elon related, is you are now moving towards having a for-profit component part of your business. Right now, it's a not-for-profit. And he, as everybody knows, if you read the papers, is suing you over this and many other things. How do you feel? I actually just want to actually ask you on a very personal level, forgetting about even the merits of the case. As a guy who has spent a lot of time with him and you guys founded this thing together.
This is not an
How
interesting
you
question.
feel personally today about all this? This is a huge...
Tremendously sad. I grew up with Elon as like a mega hero. I thought what Elon...
That tells you a lot right there, Han. And yeah. Okay, so we'll do a quick breeze through of his overall bio. Thank God this guy's wiki page is not too goddamn long. He's got a lot of press on him. That's pretty interesting, right? It's always interesting to think about like the proportions and formattings of these things. Why is there so much press about this guy? And his bio is kind of tiny, right? So let's go over the early career sections a little bit. It starts in 2005, the age of 19. Altman co-founded Loop. Massive, important company. Y'all know about Loop, right? Uh, a company based in Mountain View, California, which provided a service for smartphone users to share their location selectively with other people. The service supported all the major mobile operating systems. Each service had more than 5 million registered users. Okay. It was like a location sharing thing, social media app. That's fine. I mean, this already is a little bit more real than what you see for a lot of these kind of guys, right? Like he was involved with an actual app that seemed to do a real thing. I'm not sure it's like a super sophisticated thing, but this is fairly early, 2005, so there might not have been that many apps like this at the time. I'll give him some credit for that. That seems like an interesting thing to be involved with, a real thing to be involved with. As CEO, he raised more than $30 million in venture capital for the company, including an initial investment of $5 million from Patrick Chung of X Fund and his team of new enterprise associates, blah blah blah, investors, Y Combinator people. That makes sense. Okay, so he's in early Silicon Valley. Y Combinator comes up a lot in this world, like kind of like one of the, I think it's like a think tank. Uh, it's a startup accelerator. So it's basically like startup school, startup boot camp for these Silicon Valley types. Um, in 2012, Loop failed to gain significant user traction, so it looks like the app started to dry up by 2012. Company was acquired by the Green Dot Corporation for 43 million. So fintech company and bank headquartered in Texas. Largest prepaid debit card company by market capitalization. Interesting. So basically he starts in 2005. He's doing this app. By 2012, they're not getting a whole lot of traction, but he has taken this thing through Y Combinator. He's getting some degree of clout, prestige around the things that he's doing, and then his company gets acquired by a financial services company, um, and then he goes from that to co-found Hydrazine Capital with his brother Jack Altman. The venture capital firm is still in operation and focuses on early stage tech investments. That's interesting. That's an immediate pivot, isn't it? Right? It's interesting that he goes kind of directly from I'm gonna be like a guy making apps, making phone apps, right? Um, that are actually like kind of it's kind of a practical app, right? Like location sharing, right? That's a service that a lot of apps still use, right? A lot of apps have that kind of functionality in it to this day, and so it's a legitimately valuable piece of technology to get involved with, especially like 2005. You're 19, right? He's probably coming right out of let's see, Chicago, Jewish family, St. Louis, Missouri, dermatologist, real estate broker. So he comes from money. His mother's a dermatologist and his father's a real estate broker. Got his first computer at the age of 8. His family got him a Macintosh at the age of 8 and began to learn how to code and take apart computer hardware. My brother in Christ, I can lay claim to this. I also goofed around with a computer at a young age and tried to build a robot out of old Tupperware at one point. What is this? This means nothing. You see this in these guys' bios all the time. I promise you, this guy does not know how to write code by himself in any meaningful way. Um, let's see, in 2005, let's see, so he attended John Burroughs School in a private school in Laud, Ladue, Missouri. And then in 2005, after 2 years at Stanford studying computer science, he dropped out without earning a bachelor's degree. This guy didn't finish his bachelor's in computer science. I might low key have studied more computer science than Sam Altman. Like I've watched a lot of computer science lectures, like from MIT and stuff, because you can like there's like a bunch of free lectures on YouTube and stuff. You can like watch these like free lectures or like really in-depth breakdowns of projects from like the Game Developers Conference or whatever, or like like tons of stuff like that out there. So like low key, and I did like Code Academy at one point, like way back in the day. Is it Code Academy? What is this thing? There's like a free course that you could do. Yeah, I think this is it, Code Academy. Learn code for free. Yeah, I did this like 15 years ago and went through like all the basic, I think I did the basic HTML. Wow, 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 wow. It's all like Gen AI stuff now. Yeah, when I was on here before, it was like PHP, HTML, Python, Java, right? Like I think I learned some basic like kind of website type of stuff. Um, but yeah, this guy dropped out after 2 years of computer science. That's crazy, man. That's crazy. That is crazy. They all do this, bro. Like he dropped out. I guarantee you, what happened is he met this Patrick Chung guy at like some kind of mixer, and he just buttered him up and talked to him about this like looped thing that him and like one of his roommates or whatever was thinking about, and like he gave a good impression, and then Patrick Chung is like, oh, you sound like a next Steve Jobs candidate. You sound like a smart young man. You sound like a maybe Zuckerberg type of guy. Here, have $5 million in addition to your family's voluminous wealth. Drop out of school and just go start making a fuck ton of money, my guy. And that's what he did. That's what he did. Um, like fine, go get your money, but like don't try to convince us that because you came from a rich ass family and you know gave some guy the right kind of vibe, that means that you're so much smarter than like than like anybody else in the country, right? Like I guarantee you, there are kids in the ghetto right now who are way smarter than Sam motherfucking Altman, who have built way more interesting things, way more sophisticated tech than what this guy has built, and who will never see a dime for it. You know, like there are kids who get shot in the streets on the regular, whose hard drives have like world-changing ideas locked away in them that will never make it to the public because they didn't have a fucking dermatologist and real estate broker for parents, and weren't able to drop out of school 2 years in to take a $5 million loan and go start an app company, you know. And so he does that. He does the app company thing, for a couple of years, for like 7 years. And then he decides like, okay, I'm kind of done with tech at that point, like directly. I'm gonna go do venture capital. Okay. Venture capital basically just means oh, this is money for your startup, right? So like he's basically become the Patrick Chung kind of guy, like this hydrazine capital thing that he's co-founding is the same kind of thing as X Fund, right? X Fund is an American venture capital firm with offices in Palo Alto, Cambridge, Massachusetts. It provides early stage venture capital to entrepreneurs across multiple disciplines. And then here he is starting Hydrazine Capital, a venture capital firm that is still in operation. And presumably they're going after like tech companies and stuff. In 2011, Altman became a partner at Y Combinator, initially working on a part-time basis. He was named president of Y Combinator in 2014. So he really loves hanging out with the Y Combinator venture capital startup bros, and it seems like he's a lot more interested in this business side of things, right? So like understand this, right? He starts his tech company, his app company, Looped, and then within 6 years of that, as his tech company is starting to falter a little bit, right? Like they're not getting as many users. They're gonna sell in 2012. By 2011, he's already like, I'm not really feeling this, and this whole like Y Combinator, like startup venture capital vibe is way cooler. So like I'm gonna just like kind of double down and triple down on that, sell off my old tech company, and then I'm just gonna start my own venture capital fund. Okay, fine, dude. This is a guy who wants us to believe that he's like, like we were just listening to a story about when this guy pressed the button. This guy doesn't code. Let's see. So 2012. He's at Y Combinator. He becomes president of Y Combinator 2 years after he sells off his other thing and starts this new venture capital fund, right? So like 2012, he drops his old tech company. He starts this new tech fund, or this new venture capital fund, and then 2 years later, he's running one of the biggest freaking startup incubators in Silicon Valley, right? This is a guy who, dropped out of Stanford 2 years in and started a location sharing app that, fell apart. Like location sharing is the sort of thing where like if you really cared about that tech, it's such fundamental tech that he could have actually built in 2005 a really powerful piece of technology here that could, you know, that we could still be using loop. Like looped could have become a freaking verb, right? Like we could be talking about like anytime you share your location with someone, it's like, oh, you want me to loop you in? You want me to loop you? Like that could have just become street talk if he had built that company up. Like 2005, Y'all could have done some interesting stuff with that concept. But after 7 years, you're like, we're not really getting enough users, and I kind of am more interested in the money anyway. Okay, fair. Okay, fair. But don't come back. Don't come back around and try to convince us that you're a tech guy. Okay, so 2011, he's doing the Y Combinator thing. He's doing a lot of investing. He's very successful. And they're helping to make a bunch of or to invest a bunch of money in companies like Airbnb, Dropbox, Zenefits, Stripe. He aimed to expand YC to fund 1,000 new companies per year and sought to broaden types of companies found in that. So he's basically like he's just slanging money for the tech industry, right? Like they're slanging money hardcore. It's 2014, 2015. Like there's a real high around this kind of stuff at that time. Um, so they established Y Combinator Continuity, a $70 million equity fund designed to invest in Y Combinator companies as they matured. So basically, just like kind of continuing to build up this investment infrastructure. It's interesting because like this is telling me that Sam Altman probably has a lot to do with the type of investor culture that exists in tech nowadays. Um, Interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff. We'll talk more about Y Combinator that Y Combinator universe or that the sort of culture around tech investment nowadays. Um, let's see. I'm gonna go through a little bit more of this. We'll just kind of skim some of it, and then we might sort of go back into the details on this guy later, because it will definitely take a while to get through all of the details of his bio and kind of break them all down, right? But it's important to see this early stuff and see like kind of why is this guy a guy in this world at all, right? Like why is he able to be involved in something like OpenAI, right? Which, so like he's kind of at the top of this Y Combinator stuff. He's investing a lot of money in tech companies. He's sort of like not directly involved in the development of tech itself, but then it seems that in 2015, so this is a year after he's been named president of Y Combinator, and at the same time that he's starting this equity fund, he's also co-founding OpenAI, and alongside Elon Musk, Jessica Livingston, Peter Thiel. Okay, Peter Thiel is right there at the beginning of OpenAI. Thiel is such a character. We keep talking about him. Um, And so you can see that there's like okay, what kind of world is he in, and what is he bringing to the table, and where is he coming from? Why would Musk and Livingston and Thiel bring Altman in on OpenAI stuff? Well, it seems like Altman is like a big venture capitalist bro, a big finance bro. He's got a lot of connections in this whole sort of startup world. He's a person who probably knows how to get a hold of a lot of money and knows how to move a lot of money around for these types of businesses, right? But I see no evidence whatsoever in this man's bio that he has any kind of deep proficiency with the technology itself. He's not a garage kid. He's not welding stuff together. He's not Wozniak. He probably knows less about computers than Jobs. He is a finance bro. Okay. This is the sort of guy, that like he should have the little spectacles and the business suit, you know what I mean? Like he's over here dressing like he's coming out of the garage after just having spent some time tinkering with, his latest wonder gadget. And it turns out that no, actually your whole reason for being in this industry is because you came from a lot of money, you got your hands on a lot of money, and you helped move a lot of money. It's not about the technology here, right? And then that's when we jump into the OpenAI story in 2015, and that all starts to develop, right? Um, so when his relationship with Musk sort of enters into the public, I'm sure he's a fan of Musk all along the way here. Um, he's still doing Y Combinator stuff through 2016. And then it's not until 2019 that there's a note about him starting to step back on his role at Y Combinator, right? In order to focus more on OpenAI. So there's a lot of like internal politics going on here. It's not super clear what all's going on. Clearly, at some point along the line, him and Elon have a fight, right? This OpenAI thing has been crazy, crazy stuff. All kinds of like internal debates and people vying for power and money inside of this organization, right? There's this whole thing about him getting removed from AI, from OpenAI as CEO and then reinstated. I think this was like around when Microsoft was trying to acquire them, um, sometime around there. Yeah. This is like around their Microsoft acquisition and other such stuff. And then he has a bunch of other endeavors, side shows, as you could say. Oh, interesting. He was the CEO of Reddit for 8 days in 2014. So he didn't really stick around. I'm kind of glad that he didn't stick around at Reddit. He probably would have wrecked it. Reddit is already like a rough enough place, but they're holding on slightly better than some of the other social media sites. So, you know, my solidarity to the Reddit warriors out there. Um, Multiple rounds of funding at Reddit during COVID-19 helped create Project Covalence, clinical trials. So he's like, throwing some money into the whole, vaccine development. Um, the positive run on Silicon Valley Bank. Altman provided capital to multiple startups. Interesting. So when Silicon Valley Bank was going down the tubes, he was stepping in to provide some funds to certain startups, it seems. So he's still playing the investment thing, like he just invests. He's just an investor, like he's an investor, tech guy, well, like not tech guy in the sense of like building tech. He just invests in tech. He sees there's a lot of money in this industry overall, and is close to people in these industries, and so he keeps throwing money at it, and there's a whole internal circle of benefit that exists in that universe. It's like he's been making some moves in energy stuff again as an investor. Um, Fishing Corp. Okay, so that's sort of like the interesting stuff about his bio, the basics of his bio, and we'll probably get the chance to look into this a little bit more at some point. Personal life. A vegetarian since childhood, Altman is openly gay. Okay, interesting. He disclosed his sexuality at the age of 17 in high school, where he spoke out after some students objected to a national coming out day speaker. He dated Loop co-founder Nick Sivo for 9 years. They broke up shortly after the company was acquired in 2012. Altman and married engineer Oliver Mulherin in 2024 at their estate in Hawaii. The pair also live in San Francisco's Russian Hill neighborhood, committed to giving away on. Okay, so this is an interesting note here because we're going to be talking about his relationship with his sister in a moment. Altman is an apocalypse prepper. Of course he is. In 2016, I have guns, gold, potassium iodide, antibiotics, battery, water, gas, masks from the Israeli Defense Forces, and a big patch of land in Big Sur I can fly to. Ugh, that's of course he's that kind of guy. Peter Thiel is also gay, by the way. There's a couple of and that's probably something we need to talk about a little bit as well. Like I worry sometimes about negative tendencies that can work their way into certain ways of thinking, right? Like if you're, I worry about. young folks getting involved in gang culture, especially if you come from like a poor area or there's a lot of struggle, right? Like you got to be aware of some of the dark things that can take a hold of you under those circumstances. I think, and I worry about some queer folk in the tech world with like a lot of wealth and money and power who have struggled with like some degree of social ostracization over the course of their lives, or who have allowed themselves to have a kind of very insular relationship to the rest of the world. Is that part of some of like Altman's story here? Maybe. I don't know. Contemplated running for governor of California in 2018, but later decided not to. In 2018, Altman announced the United Slate, a political project to improve U.S. housing and healthcare policy. Da, 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 da. So he's a Democratic fundraiser. He likes Andrew Yang. Interesting. Interesting. Yang is somebody else that we got to talk about at some point because, there's some stuff there. He backed Joe Biden. Good for him. Okay. And he's talked about UBI, of course. That was Yang's big thing, the universal basic income. There are some decent ideas here, and then there's also some very bad ideas here. And like Altman might be a little bit more complex than someone like Musk. And I don't think that he's as obviously like soulless and broken, at least not yet. But he has like a very, I think, often obliviously toxic impact on the world around him. And a lot of it has to do with just like the kind of high finance that he's involved in and the sort of relationship that he has to the wider world as a result of his very generous social status, right? Economic status. All right. And so, with all of that background on the man himself, Sam Altman, we're going to take a quick break before diving into the main event. What brought us here in the first place? What's going on with this story? Do we actually think that this happened? Is there like some issues here? How do we interpret this? What do we make of it all? More of that in about 5 minutes. I'll be right back, folks. All right, how's it going, everybody? Just getting right back into it. We're on the home stretch right now, you know. Thanks for hanging out if you're still hanging out. And say hi. Any questions or comments? Go ahead and drop them in the chat. So we just went over Sam Altman, his background, how he presents himself, right? And now we're going to put a bow on this discussion just by going over this news story, which is kind of what got me doing this whole conversation in the first place, right? Because as I had mentioned earlier, I had missed this when these allegations first came out. I was a little skeptical as to, like, whether or not this was a real thing, and it turns out it's in a couple of different places. I haven't heard much about it since. Maybe this isn't even like a thing. Maybe this is just like some wacky accusations. Maybe his sister is, you know, dealing with troubles of her own, and all of this is, you know, coming out of nowhere. But it's, you know, this is being reported in the BBC, CNN, New York Times, right? It's been picked up a couple places, which you know, tells me that there's at least something to talk about here, right? So let's see what's going on here. It's actually not that long of an article, so we can probably get through this pretty quick. There's our guy, okay? ChatGPT creator Sam Altman's sister, Ann Altman, Sam and Ann, okay, has filed a lawsuit alleging that he regularly sexually abused her between 1997 and 2006. Jeez. Okay, this is real. This isn't just allegations like oh, somebody, you know, or like a claim. This is an actual lawsuit that's been filed. Like this is a real like legal case at this point. The lawsuit, which was filed on January 6th in a U.S. District Court in the Eastern District of Missouri, of course, because that's where the Altmans are from, Missouri, right? Alleges that the abuse started when she was 3 and Altman was 12. Mr. Altman, who is the chief executive of OpenAI, the firm behind artificial intelligence AI software ChatGPT, denied the claims in a joint statement on X with his mother and 2 brothers. Wow. Okay, so what's wow. That's some dirty work, man. That's some okay. Joint statement on X with it. Okay, first of all, why are you making a joint statement on X? I'm not sure if that's the way to address this. Also, ganging up on the sister with the mom and the 2 brothers is really uncomfortable to think about, especially around accusation. Like, all of these claims are utterly untrue. Caring for a family member who faces mental health challenges is incredibly difficult. And it says, warning, this story contains details that some may find distressing. Yeah, this stuff is distressing for sure. This is no joke. You know, this is what this kind of stuff happens in the world, you know, like it's I want this article to tell me a little more about their family situation, and I'm not sure it's going to. But let's see if we can try to decipher some of what's being discussed here. And we'll move slowly through. We'll try to be sensitive, okay? Mr. Altman said he gives his sister monthly financial support, pays her bills and rent, and offered to buy her a house, but that she continues to demand more money from us. Miss Altman claims her brother groomed and manipulated her and performed sex acts on her over several years. Wow. Wow. So these accusations are actually quite violent, it seems. According to a court filing. See, I don't know enough about this stuff. I'm not sure, it just seems odd to me that there would be a court filing if this is just an instance of someone being, very mentally unwell, right? You can't file a lawsuit without, putting stuff into pretty specific language. You're gonna have a lawyer. It's probably pretty grim, but we could probably find, I don't know, maybe it's not publicly available, but we could see if we could find that court filing. Court filings are often public. Said she sustained great bodily injury, severe emotional distress, and depression. I'm sure you would if that was what was that? So this is also the kind of thing too, where it's she's alleging this stuff happened over years and was severe enough to result in bodily injury. And she's putting that in black and white and submitting it to the court. She's contracting a lawyer and having a lawyer draft up documents that are going to be submitted to the court. So this is at least telling me that she takes these allegations quite seriously. She also added that she had incurred numerous medical bills because of medical and mental health. So she's saying hey, I got paperwork. Okay, whatever's in that court filing, they're hey, we have receipts, we have paperwork, we have exact descriptions of timelines and stuff. In the UK, victims or alleged victims of sexual offenses have a right to lifelong anonymity. UK legislation which creates this right does not apply to people in the US. Does she live in the UK? I'm a little confused why they're talking about this in the UK. Does she live in the UK? I'm not sure. Okay. Over the years, we've tried in many ways to support Annie and help her find stability. Adding that he had taken up professional advice on how to be supportive without enabling harmful behaviors. This kind of this gets so slippery, man, because this kind of thing and maybe we should take a look at Altman's full statement, because this is starting to sound a little bit like Weasley therapy speak, if you've ever you know that this is a type of person out there, people who will be very abusive and then also figure out how to talk about the abuse that they're inflicting, and your reaction to that abuse in this sort of very clinical fashion that can kind of mask what's really going on, right? Is that what's happening here? I really can't tell is the thing. Because yeah, it also happens that, sometimes members of a family really are suffering from like severe mental distress of some kind, some kind of big mental health issue, and conflicts like this can emerge in families where like maybe something untrue, like just kind of gets slung around and somebody, but like I feel like this is like, I don't know, the situation causes immense pain to our entire family, of course. The lawsuit added the last instance of the alleged abuse took place when Mr. Altman was an adult and she was still a minor. Miss Altman had previously made similar allegations against her brother on social media platforms such as X. Interesting. Billionaire Mr. Altman, who married his partner Oliver, is one of the technology world's most high-profile figures. Of course he is. We know this. In late 2022, OpenAI launched the ChatGPT generative AI chatbot. It has become widely used globally for its ability to create. Yeah, we know this. Okay. See, this is just like there's not a whole lot in this article. Let's see if the CNN or Times articles go into any more detail. It's interesting because all of these articles, a lot of these articles, not the New York Times one, but a lot of them are framing this as like him denying, right? Like CNBC is like the story is that he denies these allegations. I'm not sure that's the story. I think the first story is that these allegations are here and we kind of need to make sense of them to some degree. And depending on what we make of these allegations, I think that, at least for me, it affects how much I care about his denial or how I read his denial. But I want to know about the allegations first. Jeez Louise. I still don't have an X account. I am trying to avoid that at all costs. um, but I'll see if I can like read this post at least. Okay, our family loves Annie and is very concerned about her well-being. Caring for a family member who faces mental health challenges is incredibly difficult. We know many families. Over the years, we've tried in many ways to support. That's what we saw in the thing. To give a sense of our efforts, we have given her monthly financial support, directly paid her bills, covered her rent, helped her find employment opportunities, attempted to get her medical help, offered to buy her a house via our late father's estate. So this paragraph is basically just about saying we're giving her a lot of money, right, as a family. Despite this, Annie continues to demand more money from us. In this vein, Annie has made deeply hurtful and entirely untrue claims about our family, and especially Sam. We've chosen not to respond publicly out of respect for her privacy and our own. However, she has now taken legal action against Sam, and we feel we have no choice but to address this. Over the years, she's accused members of our family of improperly withholding our father's 401k funds, hacking her Wi-Fi, and shadow banning her from various websites, including ChatGPT, Twitter, and more. The worst allegation she has made is that she was sexually abused by Sam as a child. He has also claimed instances of abuse from others. Her claims have evolved drastically over time. Newly for this lawsuit, they now include allegations of incidents where Sam was over 18. All of these claims are utterly untrue. This situation causes immense pain for our families, especially gut-wrenching when she refuses conventional treatment and lashes out at family members who are genuinely trying to help her. Okay. there is a possibility that there's something that that she's just incredibly unwell, and that all of this conflict is being driven by how unwell she is. However, this statement would also fit if there had been abuse going on for a long time that maybe nobody even involved understood as abuse at the time that it was taking place until much later, right? So, I don't know. This statement alone doesn't tell me very much. This is sort of what you'd expect in terms of a statement, and it feels very looked over legally, and there's a particular, but the particular narrative steps are pretty much the same as they would be in any denial, right? Which is, you know, these claims have been made, it's hurtful, it's not true, we've actually been helping this person, they're trying to get more money out of us, right? And that's, I don't know. Cool, New York Times. Let's see. I'm just going to quickly check some of these other articles. They're all very short. And what that suggests to me is that they are all basically different versions of the BBC article we saw earlier. So let's see. Ann Altman accuses him of abuse. The suit filed in Missouri. A lawsuit says she obtained injury, she sustained bodily injury, and had experienced PTSD, several severe emotional distress, mental anguish, and depression, which is expected to continue into the future as a result of the abuse. They're all like there's not much quotation from her filing. The Times has her filing. They're quoting her legal filing. The BBC obtained a copy of the filing. They're both quoting it, but they're not linking it. Ms. Altman has long made similar similar claims against her brother on social media, which we saw in the other one. She's represented by an Illinois-based law firm that specializes in assault and harassment cases of this kind. In a statement posted on X on Tuesday, Altman denies. I'm gonna quote the statement again. Neither one of them responded for requests for comment. And now we're talking about OpenAI again. Ms. Altman's lawsuit requests a jury trial and damages in excess of $75,000. That's interesting to me. This wasn't in the BBC version. And remember the statement that Sam Altman puts out is basically saying that the reason why she's doing this is because she wants a bunch of money out of us. She's trying to get more and more and more money out of us. Why is she only suing for $75,000 in damages? If this is about extracting as much money out of you guys as possible, right? And maybe there's something that I'm missing here. Altman's lawyer, Ryan Mahoney, said in an interview with the Times that the amount was the minimum required for a federal suit of this kind. He said that if the suit proceeded to a jury trial, he and his client would seek an amount that fully compensates my client for what happened to her. He added that they were also seeking punitive damages that would be based on Mr. Altman's net worth. Mr. Mahoney said the suit was filed on Monday because of a Missouri statute that allowed survivors of childhood sexual abuse to bring a lawsuit up to 10 years after their 21st birthday. Ms. Altman turned 31 on Wednesday. So it sounds like they're not like the lawsuit, they're not asking for a ton of money out the gate. They're opening up with the 7,500, sort of the minimum amount that you need to claim for filing this lawsuit. Would there be any particular advantage or disadvantage to requesting more? You know? I guess it just seems odd to me because it sounds like in Sam Altman's statement, the rest of the family is saying, no, she's just doing this because she wants more money out of us. If she's gonna file a lawsuit against you guys, and this is a clever play to get as much money out of the family as possible, I'm just not sure that that's what this reads like, you know? And like again, maybe this is all false. Maybe these allegations are all false, and you know, there's some severe mental health issues that are leading to this. But at the very least, to me, this speaks to a misreading of her intentions in filing this lawsuit, you know? I'm not making a judgment as to what happened or what Sam Altman did or didn't do. I'm not making a judgment about, like, who is or isn't right in this case, but I am saying that it looks like, at the very least, the Altman family is misreading what their daughter, what Annie, what their sister is looking for in this interaction, right? Because this doesn't say to me that she's just looking for money. This says to me that there's more going on here. And also the fact that like it looks like she literally waited as long as possible to file this suit, right? Mr. Mahoney said that the suit was filed on Monday because of a Missouri statute that allowed survivors of childhood abuse to bring a lawsuit up to 10 years after their 21st birthday. So in other words, it sounds like this Missouri statute would not have allowed her to bring a lawsuit if she had waited any longer, right? Like there's some kind of cutoff where it says, like, if the incident happened more than 10 years ago, then you know, it's almost like a statute of limitations type of thing. Like, you can't bring this suit, which seems kind of odd to me. Like, I would think that you should allow people to bring those kinds of suits, you know, those kind of like allegations to court. If it happened 10 years ago, if it happened 50 years ago, you know? But like, I guess that's the law in Missouri. I don't know. It's all very odd. It's all very, very odd. I don't know if we're gonna get much more out of these articles. Like the CNN article, this is looking fairly similar, just perusing it to the other articles that we looked at. Yeah, it says the same thing in the CNN article. The lawsuit says the claims were brought under a Missouri law allowing child abuse victims to file suit up until their 31st birthday. So this is like literally like the last minute. Yeah, CNN. Okay, CNN is at least linking to her X account. Okay. Wow. She says, I'm not 4 years old with a 13-year-old quote unquote brother climbing into my bed non-consensually anymore. You're welcome for helping you figure out your sexuality. I finally accepted that you've always been and always will be more scared of me than I've been of you. Ah, interesting. She writes poetry. She doesn't post very much at all. Wow. So she posted about this in 2021. Wait, no, are these like out of order? Yeah, they're not in chronological order. I don't get Twitter. I don't get Twitter, man. But yeah, so she's put out this stuff before. So hold up to our dad and grandma's trusts. Um, so she says in 2023, it may also hold our dad. So this is a response here. So let me see. Fun fact, Sam Altman always carries his nuclear backpack he can use to remotely detonate data centers if ChatGPT goes rogue. It may also hold our dad and grandma's trusts. It may also hold our dad and grandma's trusts. Him and my birth mother are still withholding from me, knowing I started sex work for survival because of being sick and broke with a millionaire quote unquote brother. Oh, wow. This is a common thing as well, that people who have suffered some form of sexual abuse, it's not uncommon for them to do sex work at some point in their lives. I kind of want to know more about Annie's story, just in general. I kind of feel sad now that we spent so much time learning about Sam, and his sister might actually be more interesting of a person. Um, I don't think we're gonna have enough time to really dig into the details here. I think to really, if we really want to like unpack some of this, then we might need to look at her statement. Quickly, let's peruse the Guardian article here. I want to see if the Guardian article touches on her statements more. Because so far we've seen a lot more from Sam and his family. Yeah, this article is also just sort of like citing their statement mostly. Hmm. Yeah, these articles aren't very useful right now. Wild. So this story is very much developing. Okay. So let's try to wrap this one up a little bit. And this one's heavy, guys. This one's heavy. A lot to think about here. The guy behind the Studio Ghibli generator. Okay, okay. So what can I say? What can I say? I can say I can say this. I can say that there's a lot going on inside of this family. Okay, inside of the Altman family. There's definitely a lot of disagreement and pain within that family, and a lot of that disagreement and pain seems connected to the family wealth and financial status and potentially bad relationships between people when they were younger, and the sort of the ramifications of that cascading out into these people's lives, right? Um, I don't judge them for that being the case. That's the case with a lot of families, you know? We all have various pain points in our family histories, and I don't think anybody ought to be condemned just because they have, some pain and darkness in their family. That's a lot of us, okay? Let's be real. But I do think that if you sort of like contextualize a lot of this stuff, it's clear that we're talking about a very wealthy family. Um, and we're talking about, you know, a family that's frankly probably just a little bit out of touch at best. They're kind of in their own world, high finance, Sam and his brother are doing all kinds of high finance stuff. A lot of these people have kind of loose senses of consequences, and there's kind of like weird stuff that can happen in your brain when you're living in that kind of environment all the time. Um, and I think it's interesting to think about, I guess, sort of how someone like Sam Altman, how his influence on the world has worked over his life, right? And like what kind of mark he's left and what kind of work he's been doing. He's a he's very fortunate. He has a lot of resources right out the gate. He's in a place where he can very quickly and very easily get more resources, right? And yet he's also like, he's kind of queer, he's kind of different in some way. Not necessarily a big tech guy. He might think it's interesting and like enjoys sort of like, I don't know, some philosophy here and there, or some sci-fi here and there. But he's not writing code, not building apps from scratch himself, right? He's goofing around with stuff that he thinks is interesting, and he's kind of figuring stuff out along the way, right? Um, I really feel, I really feel that this all, this all just kind of indicates to me somebody that's like when I say out of touch, I don't just mean like you don't hang out much with regular people. I also mean that, yeah, on some level you're kind of out of touch with your own self, right? That like you just sort of have a weird view of people, you know? Maybe not an especially deep or like an especially charitable view of people, right? And now here you are in these very, very powerful positions, kind of untouchable, right? And then we're hearing stuff about this, like this about your sister and all, man. And it just makes me wonder, like, I don't know, like could you maybe spend a little more time with your family? What's your family dynamic really like? You know, like are you really the guy? Especially like I'm sure you got work on yourself to do, man. I'm sure you got work on with your family to do. Maybe this is a good time, especially since you made a lot of money. Maybe this is a good time for you to kind of take a back seat, you know? Maybe instead of like trying to push Chat GPT to be like the next big thing or whatever, or like going out there and like kind of telling this big story about what kind of super genius you are, go live in Hawaii for a little bit and get back in touch with your psyche and your soul a little bit more and maybe be less public for a while. You know? Maybe not have like opinions and takes on shit for a little bit. And if these allegations have any kind of truth to them, God help you, Sam Altman. Because people who do that kind of shit go to hell. They go straight to hell, right? Uh, so, with that, I'm ready to move on from this Altman discussion a little bit. We had some fun today, folks. We learned some interesting things. We learned some uncomfortable things. But honestly, I think we're better off for it, right? I think I was ready to have a lot more hatred in my heart towards these people. And what always happens is that I go and learn a little bit more, and you kind of have to just pity some of these folks after a certain point, right? Like you could be living a simpler life. You know, you could be living a simpler life and just have an unambiguously positive impact on the world and people around you. Maybe you're just not as rich and famous, but who cares, you know? Um, yeah. That's Sam Altman. That's the kind of weird stuff that's happening in like his world. He's gonna come up again because he is an ass. He says dumbass shit regularly. Just like the kind of stuff we saw in that interview, right? The kind of like weird narrativizing, this very dramatic way of sort of talking about the world and himself and the work that he's doing and stuff. And it just gets so exhausting, especially, as artists. I think we tend to be a little bit more in touch with some of the emotional implications and of what folks are doing out there. I don't know, man. Anyway, let's do a little bit more painting. A little bit more painting. We actually didn't even need the chalkboard, which is fine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up for us the next chapter. Next chapter of Twilight of the Idols. And we'll just listen to it for a couple minutes while we close out. I'm done with commentary though, so we'll just listen to this book without my voiceover. Yeah. Cheers, fam.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Twilight of the Idols by Friedrich Nietzsche. Chapter 2. The Problem of Socrates. 1. In all ages, the wisest have always agreed in their judgment of life. It is no good. At all times and places the same words have been on their lips, words full of doubt, full of melancholy, full of weariness of life, full of hostility to life. Even Socrates' dying words were, "To live means to be ill a long while. I owe a cock to the god Aesculapius. Even Socrates had had enough of it. What does that prove? What does it point to? Formerly, people would have said, oh, it has been said, and loudly enough too, by our pessimists, loudest of all. Quote, in any case, there must be some truth in this. The consensus sapientium is a proof of truth, unquote. Shall we say the same today? May we do so? Quote, in any case, there must be some sickness here, unquote. We make reply. These great sages of all periods should first be examined more closely. Is it possible that they were, every one of them, a little shaky on their legs, effete, rocky, decadent? Does wisdom perhaps appear on earth after the manner of a crow attracted by a slight smell of carrion? 2. This irreverent belief that the great sages were decadent types first occurred to me precisely in regard to that case concerning which both learned and vulgar prejudice was most opposed to my view. I recognized Socrates and Plato as symptoms of decline, as instruments in the disintegration of Hellas, as pseudo-Greek, as anti-Greek. Paren, The Birth of Tragedy, 1872, end paren. That consensus sapientium, as I perceived ever more and more clearly, did not in the least prove that they were right in the matter on which they agreed. It proved rather that these sages themselves must have been alike in some physiological particular, in order to assume the same negative attitude towards life, in order to be bound to assume that attitude. After all, judgments and valuations of life, whether for or against, cannot be true. Their only value lies in the fact that they are symptoms. They can be considered only as symptoms. Per se, such judgments are nonsense. You must therefore endeavor by all means to reach out and try to grasp this astonishingly subtle axiom, that the value of life cannot be estimated. A living man cannot do so because he is a contending party, or rather the very object in the dispute, and not a judge. Nor can a dead man estimate it, for other reasons. For a philosopher to see a problem in the value of life is almost an objection against him, a note of interrogation set against his wisdom, a lack of wisdom. What? Is it possible that all these great sages were not only decadents, but that they were not even wise? Let me, however, return to the problem of Socrates. To judge from his origin, Socrates belonged to the lowest of the low. Socrates was mob. You know, and you can still see it for yourself, how ugly he was. But ugliness, which in itself is an objection, was almost a refutation among the Greeks. Was Socrates really a Greek? Ugliness is not infrequently the expression of a thwarted development, or of development arrested by crossing. In other cases, it appears as a decadent development. The anthropologists among the criminal specialists declare that the typical criminal is ugly. Monstrum in fronte, monstrum in animo. But the criminal is a decadent. Translator's footnote. It should be borne in mind that Nietzsche recognized two types of criminals, the criminal from strength and the criminal from weakness. This passage alludes to the latter. Aphorism 45, page 103, alludes to the former. End translator's note. Was Socrates a typical criminal? At all events, this would not clash with that famous physiognomist's judgment, which was so repugnant to Socrates' friends. While on his way through Athens, a certain foreigner who was no fool at judging by looks told Socrates to his face that he was a monster, that his body harbored all the worst vices and passions. And Socrates replied simply, "You know me, sir." 4. Not only are the acknowledged wildness and anarchy of Socrates' instincts indicative of decadence, but also that preponderance of the logical faculties and that malignity of the misshapen, which was his special characteristic. Neither should we forget those oral delusions, which were religiously interpreted as the demon of Socrates. Everything in him is exaggerated, buffo, caricature. His nature is also full of concealment, of ulterior motives, and of underground currents. I try to understand the idiosyncrasy from which the Socratic equation, reason equals virtue equals happiness, could have arisen. The weirdest equation ever seen, and one which was essentially opposed to all the instincts of the older Hellenes. 5. With Socrates, Greek taste veers round in favor of dialectics. What actually occurs? In the first place, a noble taste is vanquished. With dialectics, the mob comes to the top. Before Socrates' time, dialectical manners were avoided in good society. They were regarded as bad manners. They were compromising. Young men were cautioned against them. All such proffering of one's reasons was looked upon with suspicion. Honest things, like honest men, do not carry their reasons on their sleeve in such a fashion. It is not good form to make a show of everything. That which needs to be proved cannot be worth much. Wherever authority still belongs to good usage, wherever men do not prove but command, the dialectician is regarded as a sort of clown. People laugh at him, they do not take him seriously. Socrates was a clown who succeeded in making men take him seriously. What then was the matter? 6. A man resorts to dialectics only when he has no other means to hand. People know that they excite suspicion with it, and that it is not very convincing. Nothing is more easily dispelled than a dialectical effect. This is proved by the experience of every gathering in which discussions are held. It can be only the last defense of those who have no other weapons. One must require to extort one's right. Otherwise, one makes no use of it. That is why the Jews were dialecticians. Reynard the Fox was a dialectician. What? And was Socrates one as well? 7. Is the Socratic irony an expression of revolt? Of mob resentment? Does Socrates, as a creature suffering under oppression, enjoy his innate ferocity in the knife thrusts of the syllogism? Does he wreak his revenge on the noblemen he fascinates? As a dialectician, a man has a merciless instrument to wield. He can play the tyrant with it. He compromises when he conquers with it. The dialectician leaves it to his opponent to prove that he is no idiot. He infuriates. He likewise paralyzes. The dialectician cripples the intellect of his opponent. Can it be that dialectics was only a form of revenge in Socrates? 8. I have given you to understand in what way Socrates was able to repel. Now it is all the more necessary to explain how he fascinated. One reason is that he discovered a new kind of agon, and that he was the first fencing master in the best circles in Athens. He fascinated by appealing to the combative instinct of the Greeks. He introduced a variation into the contests between men and youths. Socrates was also a great erotic. 9. But Socrates divined still more. He saw right through his noble Athenians. He perceived that his case, his peculiar case, was no exception, even in his time. The same kind of degeneracy was silently preparing itself elsewhere. Ancient Athens was dying out, and Socrates understood that the whole world needed him, his means, his remedy, his special artifice for self-preservation. Everywhere the instincts were in a state of anarchy, everywhere people were within an ace of excess. The monstrum in animo was the general danger. Quote, "The instincts would play the tyrant. We must discover a counter-tyrant who is stronger than they." Unquote. On the occasion when that physiognomist had unmasked Socrates and had told him what he was, a crater full of evil desires, the great master of irony let fall one or two words more, which provide the key to his nature. "This is true," he said, "but I overcame them all." How did Socrates succeed in mastering himself? His case was, at bottom, only the extreme and most apparent example of a state of distress which was beginning to be general, that state in which no one was able to master himself, and in which the instincts turned one against the other. As the extreme example of this state, he fascinated. His terrifying ugliness made him conspicuous to every eye. It is quite obvious that he fascinated still more as a reply, as a solution, as an apparent cure of this case. 10. When a man finds it necessary, as Socrates did, to create a tyrant out of reason, there is no small danger that something else wishes to play the tyrant. Reason was then discovered as a savior. Neither Socrates nor his patients were at liberty to be rational or not as they pleased. At that time it was de rigueur. It had become a last shift. The fanaticism with which the whole of Greek thought plunges into reason betrays a critical condition of things. Men were in danger. There were only two alternatives: either perish or else be absurdly rational. The moral bias of Greek philosophy from Plato onward is the outcome of a pathological condition, as is also its appreciation of dialectics. Reason equals virtue equals happiness simply means we must imitate Socrates and confront the dark passions permanently with the light of day, the light of reason. We must at all costs be clever, precise, clear. All yielding to the instincts, to the unconscious, leads downward. 11. I have now explained how Socrates fascinated. He seemed to be a doctor, a savior. Is it necessary to expose the errors which lay in his faith in reason at any price? It is a piece of self-deception on the part of philosophers and moralists to suppose that they can extricate themselves from degeneration by merely waging war upon it. They cannot thus extricate themselves. That which they choose as a means, as the road to salvation, is in itself again only an expression of degeneration. They only modify its mode of manifesting itself. They do not abolish it. Socrates was a misunderstanding. The whole of the morality of amelioration, that of Christianity as well, was a misunderstanding. The most blinding light of day, reason at any price, life made clear, cold, cautious, conscious, without instincts, opposed to the instincts, was in itself only a disease, another kind of disease, and by no means a return to virtue, to health, and to happiness. To be obliged to fight the instincts, This is the formula of degeneration. As long as life is in the ascending line, happiness is the same as instinct. 12. Did he understand this himself, this most intelligent of self-deceivers? Did he confess this to himself in the end, in the wisdom of his courage before death? Socrates wished to die. Not Athens, but his own hand gave him the draught of hemlock. He drove Athens to the poisoned cup. Socrates is not a doctor, he whispered to himself. Death alone can be a doctor here. Socrates himself has only been ill a long while. End chapter 2. This recording is in the public domain.
Well, there you go, folks. I think I'm gonna leave this really sketch, not so much painting, but I can probably make a painting out of it later. I'll leave this here for now. If you've been hanging out this long, I really appreciate you dropping in to say hello. Shouts outs again, Asa Singh, Una Foss, Movies by Rocky, Maxwell Lucas. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. Anyone else who's been hanging out and listening, even if you haven't been commenting, that's you're always welcome. And hopefully you got something interesting or enjoyable out of our stream today. I know we were covering some kind of heavy stuff and some heady stuff. There's a lot of interesting discussion though too. And yeah, no, we're still just kind of finding our footing with these streams. It's gonna be kind of casual like this for the foreseeable future. We'll be having some more kind of art and hang out and read stuff and listen to stuff and talk about stuff type of vibe, that's just what we do over here. And I'll keep you posted. Hopefully there'll be some more interesting and exciting things coming in the future as well. As I've think I alluded to, I'd love to get some folks on and have some conversations, do some little like casual chat discussion interview type of vibes with some folks out there, people who know more than me about things like philosophy and technology and history and all kinds of great things like that. So this has been an early Ghost Kid stream. Thank you again for joining, and I'm gonna wrap us out. The music plays out. You can go on about your day. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Much love.